How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another episode of the Pursuing Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Peterson. This is the place where you can learn how to master your health, your wealth, and your love all in one place. So I hope you look forward to another great episode with another great guest. Before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that the best way to support the show is to simply subscribe, like, and share this episode with your friends. Also, if you want to get more involved with the show, check out our website at pursuinggreatnesspodcast.com. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoy. I hope you have your pen and paper ready to take some notes on some great wisdom coming your way. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the other side of the episode. And we are live. Today we have with us Anu Bardwaj. Anu is a mama on the move who will be launching the State of Women podcast network later this fall. Among many of her accomplishments, she is passionate about being a digital nomad. Having lived, worked, and traveled the globe extensively, Miss Bhardwaj is excited to share her success secrets with us today, how she got there, and how you can get there as well. Anu, thank you very much for jumping on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm great, Gabe. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. To get us started, why don't you tell us, who you are, where you're from, what you do, and how you got started down that path in the first place.
So to start, I'm a global citizen. I'm from everywhere but nowhere at the same time. I grew up in the U.S. part of the time and in India when I was a child in a city called Hyderabad, and I'm from Charleston originally, South Carolina. And for undergrad and grad school, I went to Washington, D.C. And once I was finished with that, I had won $500,000 in scholarships and grants to live, work, and travel the world. So I won a lot of free money to go to Singapore. And from there, I was looking at indigenous remedies for HIV/AIDS in children, working with monks, shamans, and healers. So I went all the way from Borneo to Tibet overland, just meeting with all of these healers, learning about holistic medicine. And this is like 85% of the world that we're talking about that uses this kind of healing and wellness as their primary source of care. And so I was working on that, wrote my graduate thesis on modernizing traditional medicine, and then moved to Stockholm, Sweden, where I was for 4 years, did my MBA and won a Fulbright to go to IIT Bombay in India. And that's when everything shifted. I worked on a global benchmark on women in private equity, got into the private equity space, and started raising funds for funds, basically. And it was anywhere from $100 million venture fund to $20 billion fund of funds in collaboration with the State Department and the Commerce Department post when I finished my Fulbright. I did that work for about 10 years total. And then I launched Women Investing in Women Digital, which I'm working on now. We've been working on this globally. All of our events have been in different cities across the United States, across Europe, the Middle East. We did do one in South Africa and Singapore, and that's been scaling over the past 5 years. We're close to 1 million followers on Facebook now, and have developed a reach, started our own podcast, Women Investing in Women and Girls, which did really well on Voice America Radio. And just recently, about a year ago, we dove into starting our own podcast network, the State of Women Podcast Network. And you can learn more about this on thestateofwomen.com. We're going to be launching 2 apps this fall on Android and iOS. And they are almost in beta. For those of you that want to test it out, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I'm happy to include you.
Awesome. I love it, man. There is so much to dive into there. So, I mean, I'm sure where I'd like to take this is, how people can use digital to launch their business. Obviously, you have great expertise in that area. Before we go there, though, I want to jump back into your story, because it sounds like you have, a wide breadth of different things that you've done. And it's just, having somebody like you on the show, it's always fun to hear, where they've been. So it sounds like you got started in Hyderabad. You were born in India.
Yeah.
I've been to Hyderabad, and it's a beautiful country. I love India, especially the food. Love Indian food.
Amazing.
And then you went to DC, for schooling, and you got a $500,000 scholarship to travel the world and study shamanism and monks, and holistic medicine. That is, I love that, because that's such a, it's a dear topic to me, especially because, I'm not a fan of all the pills that are being pushed these days, though I'm not in the medical field. And I just love the idea of holistic medicine.
Thank you.
So you went on from there into private equity, which is a 360-degree turn,
And
going from studying holistic medicine to working in the private equity industry, at an IIT in India with a Fulbright scholarship. So that, I mean, I kind of want to jump into that real quick. That had to have been an amazing transformation for yourself, having, focusing with, working with monks, working with shamans and healers on holistic medicine. And then, that's one day. And then the next day, you're all of a sudden working in banks and with startups and, raising money. It's completely different world. So kind of tell us, how was that transition for you?
so really, it's all about people at the end of the day. And the people that I had worked with for like the first 10 years, the first decade, let's say, the monks, the shamans, and the healers, they're the most authentic individuals, selfless individuals who were impacting millions, if not billions, of people around the world. So their work is extremely meaningful, and it's passed down generation to generation. And it all comes down to respect at the end of the day. If people don't trust you, then what's the value ultimately, right? Like, you can have the most amount of power and money, but if you don't have people's respect, it's kind of nil. So I think with working with all of those individuals, these revered, loved, beloved individuals, you learn a sense of compassion, a sense of authenticity, the importance of healing and wellness, ultimately, like at its core, that everything is interconnected. And there couldn't have been better ground for me for anything else in life than to have had that at my core. Ultimately, it wasn't about how much money you made out of it at the end of the day. It's about what you became as a human being to connect to the rest of this planet, and also kind of decisions that people are making and why. It takes you to the root of that. And if you can align with those individuals, I think there's nothing greater. Ultimately, it's a spiritual calling, like you either do it or you don't. And I traveled many miles to find these individuals. They're not someone that you can call up and say, hey,
They don't have
tell
a cell
me.
phone.
They don't have a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone, but we
Oh, nice.
managed to find each other. And when we did, it was like this open heart connectivity. And so I think, like, moving into the private equity space, it's like you end up walking in with this core,
Hmm.
and people can either understand your frequency or they don't. Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, these individuals are making very, very big decisions that are going to impact many, many people, many, many families. And the question being is, why are you raising this money? What are you raising this money for? Can I be of service? And ultimately, am I doing what's right and what's good at the end of the day? And there were hundreds of millions of dollars at stake here, and people that are allocating this money also want to make sure they're making the right decisions. So really, what I had ended up doing is working with the people that were writing the checks, the institutionals, the family offices, some royal families, just really exceptional human beings that wanted to ensure that the decisions that they were making were going to both give them returns, but also give them value for what they were putting their money towards. So it's almost like you take this responsibility of really bringing the best of the best to them. And when you consistently do that over and over again, it's a certain credibility, and you don't compromise your values at any point in time, ultimately. And I think what was happening when I got started in the industry was the global financial crisis.
Mm.
And people who were sitting in positions of where money was being controlled had started to forget these values.
Mm.
And I was new, and I was fresh, and I was pure at the, from like where I had started. It wasn't an
Right.
investment bank or bank per se. It was literally like connecting energy to energy. And it was a beautiful time in my life to get into this space, because it was um, a lot of change, just like what we're going through right now with Corona. Like, people are feeling this sense of apprehension. And it's like, if you think about it, when we reflect on this period, it's the people that are moving forward with solid values that are going to go back and say, you know what, we thought about this 5 years ago, and this is the world that we wanted to see. So it's sort of similar to like what I went through 10 years ago. And when you see money moving, if you're in a position to move it in the right direction, what a great position to be in. And so I just felt it as a transition of what I had been doing before and the people that I was working with and why. And it all worked out great. We raised a serious amount of money, and I reinvested it into women investing in women digital, which I'm doing now. And it's all being channeled in the direction of greater good always.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, I mean, so you said a few things that kind of stuck out to me. I mean, you were working with these monks, and you know, when you're working with them, they really do. I mean, I obviously I didn't do it, but I can imagine that they have a very solid, loving core. And so you kind of took that, and that became, you know, who you were through those 10 years. And then you really developed, you know, your trust and your integrity. And then you moved into the financial space, and you kind of brought those values with you into
Right.
that space, and you know, have continued to do that to this day. And so, I mean, I love that you were kind of marrying the two fields of finance with it, which is almost 100% logic a lot of the times.
Yeah.
I'm a real estate investor, and so that's how we do. That's how I make my money. And so with the heart, with the you know, your work with the monks and the shamans over in Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
and you married the
Absolutely.
two and brought them forward. So that's I love hearing that.
Absolutely.
So so going forward, so now we've already covered the monks. You've modernized medicine, and then you went into private equity, and then since then you have gone into the digital space, and this is really where you're kind of shining right now. Is
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. With the State of Women podcast network. So kind of take us into that, and what is the goal there? And then after this, I really want to dive into, you know, there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs, people who want to start businesses, and you can give them advice on how to use social to their advantage. But before we get there, you know, tell us, what is the State of Women podcast network, and what are you guys trying to do over there?
Absolutely. So this is all one thread, if I may. Ultimately, the planet right now, we have a huge gender imbalance. Like, women are not equal in any country in the world. I'm not picking on any specific place, and in some places it's worse than others. But if you look at the gender equality indexes, we have a long way to go, and it's affecting us in terms of what we can do as humanity ultimately. And if we gave women more opportunities, treated them fairly, and not exploit them, we're going to be much better off as a human race. And so, what I had always said from day one when I started Women Investing Women Digital is there's a lot of wealth that's being controlled by women. There was a study that just came out by McKinsey like a week ago saying 30 trillion in the next 5 years is going to be controlled by women around the world. And that's some serious money. And ultimately, this capital is going into women-led enterprises and funds. And that's the intention. Like, we hope like women will step up and start putting their money where their values are. And ultimately, what had happened when I transitioned from private equity to media is we want to empower women with their money to start investing in other women. So it's Women Investing Women is our parent company. And in order to do that, we have to do two things. We have to increase confidence on how these women feel about putting their money towards something that is going to improve society or give them better value returns, and then also reduce like their fear, because right now they're risk averse as a
Mhm.
whole. There's alphas out there, and they do amazing deals and things like that. I'm sure you've come across in your profession as well. And so we felt like media was that channel. And when we created Women Investing, Women Digital, we had seminars, roundtables, events. Our last event in Stockholm, Sweden, had 1,400 women talking about investing at
Oh,
NASDAQ
wow. That's awesome.
Stockholm, Nordic Stock Exchange floor, and that was awesome. But at the same time, there was this gap. This was 5 years ago, and we said we don't have any live stream, we don't have any podcasts, we don't have any social. We should start thinking about this now. And we made this pivot 5 years ago to not be doing conferences around the world like we used to, seminars and whatnot. We said, let's take it digital, created a Facebook group with 500 followers that, attended our events. And now that group's 985,000 followers. And we've been growing organically over the past 4 years. And what we've done is we've been really consistent about our content. We've shared content on entrepreneurship, investing, leadership, just really important studies that are going on right now. We're tracking what's happening in the space. And what we realized is that 95% of our audience is millennial and 55% is actually male. So we're not bashing any men. We're saying let's all do this together. Let's be inclusive. And ultimately, we've got both sides. We need to be working hand in hand to work on these issues, is to really bring it forward. So I think, what we've learned in the past is money is important, absolutely. Kindness and love is important, and compassion, which is great. But what's also very important is our voices. And none of this is going to happen unless we step up and step into what's happening now, especially now, like during Corona. And, just 4 months ago or 5 months ago when quarantine started,
Wow, 5 months. That's crazy.
5 months, yeah, right? So I had spoken to my team in India, and they were making mobile apps for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, I've got 150 podcasts that have signed on already to our network. And these are coming from Australia, from Europe, Africa, North America. We've got Latinas also included. And so literally they're coming from all over the world. And I said, let's make this app. And in India right now, especially with Corona, there's population dense areas and there's also displaced populations. And what we've felt is, it's great if we come up with a vaccine tomorrow, but how are these people ultimately going to find out about what this is and why they should be injecting themselves with a vaccine? So ultimately, what we're doing is we're taking our entire platform and migrating it towards audio, like towards podcasting, getting them content. There's 800 million girls out of school right now around the world.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
And some of them may not go back. Some of them may get married. Some of them may get trafficked. Some of them may have to go to work at an early age, like in some countries where it happens, child labor still. So we're really trying to get a solution out there that's going to help families, help women, help kids very quickly. And our apps are almost done. They should be ready next week for beta testing. And we're also in discussions with a team to get it on Kaios phones and Geo phones. These are like low latency phones in the developing world. And so we're trying to get it out there to people that absolutely need it the most. And we have all these podcasts already ready to keep them learning and educating themselves.
Awesome. I love it. So you guys are creating audio content specifically to help educate. Oh, sorry. I saw you.
Aggregating, not creating. So this is already created.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
We've done this with our whole platform. So we've been aggregating from day one. And now we're just bringing in voices from other parts of the world.
I love it. And then you're distributing that through the app that you guys created.
Correct. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Distribution platform.
Yep. I love it. That is when I think of education, that's one of the things. They talk about the wealth gap, but I feel like the education gap is also
100%.
equally as important in that realm. So I love that you guys are doing that. I'm trying to connect to the people, especially in India, that are displaced from this coronavirus, this craziness that's happening around us
all over the world. It's Africa as well. And, the rest of the world doesn't have the access you and I do. We take it for granted. And, we're safe and we can quarantine and we can, social distance and things like that. But just imagine if, work is all you have to live and eat and, this is refugee situation. It's really bad. Prison situation. a lot of people didn't find out, and you'll learn later, oh yeah, if they had known, they'd been given the information before, we could have like controlled this. And that's what's ultimately happening now in the world, is people are realizing how critical communication is, and it should be like a human right at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I love everything that you guys are doing. I want to ask one question. I like to give listeners, specific takeaways that they can use for their own life, regardless of what situation they're in. So again, a lot of people listening to this podcast, they may want to start a business, or maybe they have started a business and they're trying to grow it. If you could give those individuals listening, watching, one or two pieces of advice when it comes to growing their business with social, what would those pieces of advice be?
With social specifically, it's about, you need to be consistent. Like whatever it is, like figure out what your message is, figure out your medium. So for me, I work extremely well on Facebook, and I use it sort of as my way of staying cutting edge. Like I get all of my articles in one place, and that's why I built the page that I built with the following, because ultimately I know what's going on and I can stay on top of research and thought leaders in my space. So really just find your medium. If you have the patience to get ready every day and take 2 hours to do Instagram, or like you've got a beautiful eye for pretty things everywhere, do Instagram. Like figure out what your medium is. I tried Instagram. I need help. Twitter is not my deal. Like it's just too fast. I mean, Facebook works great. So figure out one medium, and then once you can prove it, then you can jump to other ones and get help as you need, once you know like what your community really likes and wants. And that's probably the same with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes some time to figure out. It's like, you're growing a brand, you're growing a baby, you have to figure it out, like test, trial and error. And when it comes to just in general about being an entrepreneur, like the one piece of advice, a professor of mine in college, his name was Dr. Daddio, legit.
Awesome.
So Dr. Daddio wrote my recommendations for Fulbright. And I remember when I was an undergrad and I went to go see him, and I said, my life is over. I didn't win the award. Like, there was a political controversy in India and I wanted to go back. And
Very, very typical undergrad. I think
it
I
was
had
so
that
bad.
same
I was
thought
like,
as well.
I have no plan B. And he goes, Anu, like, what's your plan B? And I said, I don't have one. I was for sure like gonna do this, and I knew this was the right time. And he's like, listen, I'm gonna tell you one thing. It's coming from, I think it's Joe DiMaggio. He's like, it happened like when he struck out and it was like a big deal. And he said, listen, the biggest difference between winners and losers is how fast you get up. He's like, what's your plan B? And I said, I'm going to apply for another program. And he goes, that's a good idea. I'll write your recommendation. I ended up winning a full scholarship back to Georgetown grad school with the same application. I resubmitted the Fulbright, and I said, this is what my intention was, and this is what I want to create, and I'd like to do this graduate program. And from that one scholarship, I went to another scholarship and another, and it was just cut and paste by the end of the day. And so ultimately, it's persistence, and it's about, just knowing when to get back up quickly. And this is going to happen to you as an entrepreneur. You're going to face people that don't want to partner with you. You might not have your product ready. You might have like a international calamity, like a pandemic situation, like you're probably experiencing now. Like everything could be going wrong. But ultimately, the people that are going to be the ones that do the best are the ones that can pivot and move and get back up very quickly. And you're seeing that in the industry right now. Like there's so many event companies that are going under, but the ones that have figured out how to do their events online are the ones that are still, using their relationships and taking it to the next level. And also with the space with podcasting, so many people had to go home for the pandemic and work from home. And there was a stat out there that said 100,000 new podcasts were started during quarantine. Wow. 70% were women.
Wow.
So their stay-at-home moms are like really like killing it, and just, you're the cook, the driver, and the podcast host, everything you can imagine. So really just stick with it, know yourself, and know why you're here and what your values are, and just be very persistent with what you're trying to do and why.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's all really good advice. And I just kind of want to piggyback on what you said about social media. You said be consistent and choose one platform.
Yep.
And I think that's super, super valuable advice. Very simple, but it does work. On top of that, I would also suggest anybody who wants to get out there, choose a platform that works to your audience's advantage. So if you're B2C, business to consumer, then Facebook is great. If you're B2B, try LinkedIn. So really, really understand your platform and who's going to be using it, and that will really help you grow your following faster. And I love that you said pivot and get back up, because I mean, there's plenty of examples out there. Something that recently in my own life, this is a very small example, but there's a really nice restaurant here in Seattle, and they had to close down obviously for Corona. But since probably about 2 months ago, they have been doing concept restaurants, and they're all outdoors, and they move them in different parts of the city. And it's just an example of, things are not going to go your way,
Yeah.
regardless of how good you are. It doesn't really have to do with you. It has to do with the fact that you're in a world that's infinitely complex, and it will eventually, something's going to happen and it's not going to go your way. And so what really determines whether you're going to be able to go forward is if you can get yourself back up, how quickly you can get
Hmm.
yourself back up. So I love that you said that. Um, we're closing in on the end of the podcast here, so we have real quick questions. This is
Sure.
kind of a lightning round here that we like to ask. um, this is kind of a deep question, so but it's still, give as quick a question as you can. If you could go back to the Anu, who is back in Hyderabad, she bright-eyed, new to the world, didn't quite know what she was doing, she was going forward, and just give her one piece of advice going forward into life, what is that piece of advice you'd give her?
Be true to yourself always.
I love it. I love it. Simple and super effective. We get our information from so many different places, from podcasts, from YouTube, from TV, from our friends and family. I like to get information from books, so I always like to ask people book recommendations. If you could give one book on business and then one book on just anything else that you prefer, what would that be?
Um, okay, so a book that I really, really enjoyed. It was like super long, like super, super long, but it was very, very interesting. It was called A Suitable Boy. It was by this Indian author named Vikram Sheth, and it was about an arranged marriage. And it was written like a poem. It was just super eloquent. Like each chapter had like he wrote the book, and I don't know if he wrote the poem. He must have written the poem after, but it was just so beautifully done. It's like a book that stands out. When it comes to business, I don't read a lot of business books per se. I watch a lot of video content. I watch a lot of
Hmm.
YouTube videos, just leaders, and I I'm a huge fan of Jeff Bezos,
Oh yeah.
and he really like saw into the future. I got my master's in e-commerce, so it's no surprise there, but it's just to really know what your value is, and start with something really basic and really small, and um, once you can get that to work, it's basically how to take that and blow it up. And and I think that's just fantastic, that like his success is incredible, and even in a situation like what we have now in the world, like he's probably like the top of the top. And so I would really say I look at leaders like Jeff Bezos.
Awesome. If only
Really,
he wrote a biography or an autobiography, that would be great.
yeah, right.
I'm in Seattle, so Amazon's everywhere here. So,
I bet.
so good recommendation.
Awesome.
Um, so last question. I mean, you've given us a lot. So if someone were to bring you something, what would you want to receive? Be it, people who could maybe get involved with your podcast,
Yeah.
or anything like that.
So in your app stores, I want to say hopefully by November, download Chic. It's spelled SHEQ. Some people are calling it SHEQ, which it doesn't really matter. Chic. So download Chic, please, and hopefully we'll have it in some of these phones overseas in Africa and Asia if you're listening from there. but for sure in Android and iOS, we should be live. And we have so many international partners that are working with us. And one of the partners has a library of 10,000 podcasts. So it won't be 150, it's going to be much more. Listen and download and support these women's voices and find content that you like, and that's going to hit our audience and help a lot of women and girls around the world along the way. Thank
There you go. So open your Google store or your Apple App Store and download Sheq, SHEQ, the app.
Thank you.
Anu,
write
also,
us a review.
What was it? Oh yeah, and write a
You
review.
should write us a review. I'm gonna hound you on this one.
Sounds good.
Okay.
If somebody did want to get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to do
LinkedIn.
that? LinkedIn. Perfect. And so if somebody does want to contact Anu, I will put her LinkedIn URL in the show notes. You can click through there and get in contact with Anu. So again, Anu, thank you very, very much for coming on the show. I had a blast talking to you. You've had an awesome story, awesome life.
Thank you.
For everybody listening and watching, thank you guys for coming on this journey with us. I hope you got a lot of wisdom that you can apply to your own life. Again, the best way to support the show is just to subscribe, like, and share with your friends and family. And we look forward to having you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for sticking with us on another episode of the Pursuing Greatness podcast. I hope you got a lot of value out of that guest. Again, the best way to support the show is just to subscribe, like, and share with your friends and family. Also, check out pursuinggreatnesspodcast.com if you want to get more information about what we do and what we offer. I hope you guys have a great day and keep living in integrity with yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode coming shortly.